Hello everybody, welcome back to my 12 Rules for Life series. Today we're going to be covering Rule 9, which is assume the person you are listening to knows something you don't. If you haven't seen any of my previous videos, pretty much what I'm going to do is I'll summarize some of Peterson's key points and then I'll give my opinions on the chapter. And if you're wondering why I have tape on my mouth, it's a very unfortunate pimple. I said in a previous rule, I don't remember which one, but I said that 12 Rules for Life reminds me a lot of the book Think Again by Adam Grant, and in this rule, I really see it, because pretty much the whole argument of Think Again is to assume that you could be wrong, and that's precisely what Rule 9 is. To my knowledge, though, what makes Peterson's opinion unique is his clinical therapy experiences that I don't believe that Adam Grant has. I believe he's an organizational psychologist. But anyway, I found it interesting how Peterson talks about how a lot of times psychotherapy works because people just want an explanation for why things are the way they are so that they can move forward. Even if this explanation is inherently biased from the therapist, like, oh, it's X reason why this happened, that must be it. You could go to another therapist and they'd say, oh, it's Y reason, that's obviously it. But Peterson, I think, is arguing that it doesn't even matter where it came from. It's just that there was a reason. Like, there is an explanation to what is going on, and that's just enough to give people an identity to then go forward. What Peterson says about memory, I also found really interesting. He basically argues that we don't just remember things to remember things. We remember things so that those memories will then help us in the future. And I found it interesting how he basically described his clinical practice as helping his patients sort out what they should remember and what they can just leave in the past and forget. Of course, the main idea of this rule was it was all about listening. And I really like the general guideline Peterson gives for listening, and it's that if your conversations are boring, it's because you're a bad listener. The best conversations are always the ones where people are sharing their thoughts, giving their honest opinions towards a central topic. And when I think of any good conversation I've ever had where I've walked away and I was like, yeah, that was a good conversation, they're all like this. Besides the ones that are just like pure like goofiness, like just like saying random gibberish all the time and that being funny, like they're all like this. And there's two reasons for this. Reason number one is that if you aren't a good listener, then you won't be able to give good responses, and that will cause the conversation to just die. And also, if you aren't a good listener, people aren't going to want to tell you very interesting things. But on the other hand, if you are a good listener, people will be more honest and willing to share some just sometimes seemingly absurd things that you wouldn't think they would tell you. And this idea of listening goes beyond conversations with two or more people. It's even relevant to you as an individual, because what Peterson defines as true thinking is pretty much giving the voices in your head, the different opinions in your head, equal fighting ground to prove their point. It's not just letting that one voice that you want to win just overpower the others. It's truly considering what those other voices have to say. It's weighing with equal merit each opinion and then coming to a true, genuine, honest consensus. So it should be pretty obvious by now that being a good listener leads to a good conversation, but what does a good conversation even look like? In this chapter, Peterson highlights some just like general types of conversations, and I've kind of separated them into the bad, the good, and the best. Basically, all the bad types of conversations are when one or both or everyone is just focused solely on themselves. So there's like the one-up conversation where you're always trying to outdo the other person. There's the type of conversation where you aren't thinking about what the other person is saying. You're instead getting ready to respond. And then there's the type of conversation where you're trying to win. You're trying to beat the other person. You're not trying to work together to form a valid consensus. Now, here are the good conversations. Something I found interesting is the way that Peterson describes lecturing as a conversation. He says that a good lecturer is able to pretty much read the room and read the audience. So even if the audience is not speaking, their body language is showing, And a good lecturer will take that and adapt their speech to further fit the audience. The other good type of conversation he calls, or I call it, is pretty much the wit off, is the best way to put it. It's pretty much where you just do anything but be boring. And these are typically just like the ridiculous, funny, silly conversations, which, I mean, do they really fit in the good? I don't know. I'm just going to put it there. It's not that deep. And then finally, the best type of conversation is mutual exploration. This is pretty much when both people they're not trying to fight one another, but they're working together to think about one defined topic and then come to a consensus on it. They aren't interrupting each other, they're waiting for the other person to respond, fully understanding what the other person says, and then responding honestly to further their analysis on the topic. They are not trying to make their opinion win or try to make themselves seem better than the other person or to destroy the other person. None of that. In this type of conversation, people share their responses, which then stimulates new thinking in the people listening, and then they share their responses again, and then it keeps just going cyclically like this until you reach some sort of consensus or the conversation ends. And on that note, that's all I have to say. Go have more mutual exploration conversations, and have a good day, guys.